Shiur. Okay, so we're on the end of Gimel Amud Aleph. Very important. All Gemara is important, but a very central sugya, which is hopefully will answer or begin answering some of the questions that we've sort of been floating around since we began learning Hotzaah. Again, Hotzaah seems to have three components. I don't mean this in a deep way, I just mean sort of practically speaking. We see from the Mishnah, it has Akira, we can call it chaburah, move from Rishus to Rishus, and it has Halacha. And we struggle to know exactly the relationship between Akira and Halacha on the one hand, and Havara on the other hand. And our sugya is going to explore what Akira and Halacha is. And even though the sugya ostensibly is about a kind of practical question, which is Akiras Gufo, Akiras Chayfet, it will, the way we will learn it anyway, it will cause us to have to, it will cause us to think deeply about what exactly is Akira and Halacha, what's really going on in Akira and Halacha. And the background to this, again, I don't mean this in deep, but on a very superficial level, is that Akira and Halacha are problematic. Why should we need Akira and Halacha? What are they adding? If there's a melacha called Hotzaah, moving something from one rishus to another rishus, why do you need an Akira and Halacha? What's it for? What's the role of Akira and Halacha? Can you just move a little bit that way because I like seeing everyone and I get a little distracted. Thank you. Perfect. That's spot on. Okay, shifted over. Sorry, this is my mishagas. So, what is the role of Akira and Halacha? What's adding to the melacha? If the melacha is Hotzaah, moving it, let's say in one direction, or hachnasa, moving it from a shasiyach to shasabim with reverse, why exactly do you need Akira and Halacha, and what's their role? Now, in the previous sukkah, we sort of touched upon it because we saw somewhat of a discussion about what is the core melacha and in what ways Akira and Halacha somehow just the completion of the melacha, because we saw an idea that it could be your chayv of the melacha only by doing one component, but this sugya will add another dimension to that, and that's what we're going to be really focusing on in our learning. I didn't really give any maram komis because it's enough that we do Gemara Rashi Tosis in the sugya. I added in the Rosh for those who are able to do it. I added the Maharam at the back for those who are able to see it. Maharam is not essential. It's very interesting what he says, but if it's too heavy or tough, don't bother with it. The Rosh is quite essential. I won't get up to the Rosh today, but I would humbly suggest that everyone does have a look at the Rosh on the sugya. And if we manage just Rashi Tosis, we'll have done well. I want to make another comment just about the structure of the sugya before we move forward, which is that the Gemara asks a question. Rav asked Rebbe a halachic question. Rebbe, we need to probe what Rav's question is. What's his dilemma? Rebbe gives an answer, and we need to probe what Rebbe's answer is. That's what we will be doing. I also want to say on a structural level that we have Rashi's explanation of the Gemara. We have Tosfos' interpretation of Rashi's answer to the Gemara, and it's not obvious that the way Tosfos interprets Rashi is the only way to interpret Rashi. Then we have Tosfos' own explanation of the Gemara, and then we have the Rosh. And in a sense, we're going to learn four paths through the sugya. Tosfos is such a difficult reading of Rashi that it seems to me that Tosfos must have had some other girsa in Rashi or the like. It's almost impossible to read Tosfos' quote of Rashi into what we have in Rashi itself. Now, in general, in our sort of our derech halimud, it is with great trepidation and awe acceptable to sometimes consider Rashi may have meant something different to what Tosfos, how Tosfos reads Rashi. Almost invariably, in a sense, when Tosfos argues on Rashi, we have to, on some level, come to the conclusion that Rashi was thinking something that Tosfos wasn't thinking. So there's not an easy way to avoid that. But to say that Tosfos misread a Rashi, you have to be quite arrogant to say such a statement. The Tosfosim were the Talmidim of Rashi. And very often the descendants of Rashi, the grandchildren of Rashi, and so on. So one has to be quite cautious around saying such a thing. On the other hand, sometimes we do need to explore the possibility because, by definition, if they're challenging and arguing Rashi, I mean something has gone wrong. Rashi was thinking something. In this case, however, Tosfos really seems very far off what we have in Rashi, and there is suggestion, it's not my own suggestion, others also have noted this, that it could be they had some different text of Rashi. It was very hard to know what to make of it all. Okay, so all I want to say for now is we will explore this one by one, but from our point of view, effectively we're going to see a four-way machlokas rishonim, if you like. We're going to see Rashi as we seem to have it, Rashi is understood by Tosfos with very serious problems. And maybe we will have to say that Rashi is indefensible because it's not what Rashi says, at least the way we have it. Tosfos' own interpretation, the Rashi's interpretation, that's the layout of our sugya that we're going to learn. Okay, so with that introduction said, let's get to learning. Akiras Gufo, Akiras Chayfetz, Mekoma Domi, Mechayev, Edul Malay, Omalay Chayev. Okay, so you have a situation where someone has lifted the object onto Reuven, and then Reuven walks out of the Rishus. So Reuven he didn't lift the object off the floor, but the object was placed on him, and then he merely carried it out. So this is the halachic question that's being asked. We could, by the way, wonder about a symmetrical question, which is Hanochas Gufo Hanochas Chayfetz Domi Oloi. Tosfos already brings that to our attention, but it's again an interesting halachic question, because you could have the same thing in reverse. What happens if, when you arrive in your destination, you don't put the object down, you just stop in the destination? Is putting your body down the same as putting the object down? And we'll have to get to that, but for now, I'm going to push that to the side and just think about what the Gemara says. Now, how are we meant to understand the question of the Gemara? So there's basically, I think, two ways of contemplating Rav's question. One way of understanding it is that since the object's place is on the human body, I am transferring the location of the object from Rishus to Rishus, from Rishus Rabbin to Rishus Yachid, or the reverse, without ever removing the object from its place. Normally, in the classic example of the melachot of Hotzaah, I lift up an object from its mokum, I transfer its Rishus, and I put it down in a new mokum. In this situation, the chayfetz has remained in one mokum, which is placed, let's say, on my shoulder, but it has moved from Rishus to Rishus. Now, is that sufficient to do the melacha? Maybe it's not enough that the object has moved from Rishus to Rishus, but I need that the object is removed from place to place. That I've lifted or removed the object from its place, and I've put it in its new place, or maybe not. That's something around that maybe is one way of reading the Gemara. We'll have to understand what the counter argument is and why indeed Rav paskins that you're chayiv. But Rav's question is built upon identifying a weakness in my action, in which I haven't moved the place of the object. I've left the object in place, and all I've done is perhaps moved the rishus of the object. Now, the response to Rav's question could be all sorts of things. Maybe it's who cares, or yeah, it's enough that you've moved the rishus, you haven't moved the place of the object. We can work that through, and we will work it through in a moment. But that is reading number one in the question of the Gemara, that the object remains in place. Maybe that's insufficient for the melacha. On a very vague, intuitive level, why would it be insufficient for the melacha? Because it's not enough to move the object from rishus to rishus, you also have to move it from place to place. Okay. Model number two is a type of conceptual grammar or indirect causation. I don't mean classic grammar, but model number two is of course the object has moved from place to place. It was sitting in the Rishus HaYachid, moved to the Rishus Rabbin, but I'm not directly engaging with the object. I'm not taking the object, picking up the object and moving it to a new place, which is how is direct engagement with the object. In a sense, all I'm engaging with is myself, my body. I am moving from place to place, and the object just sort of moves along with me. So there's a type of indirect causation of making the object mean. Again, I'm using the word grammar in borrowed sense. I don't mean this as classic grammar. What I do mean is that melachos are engaging in a certain activity, a certain action, and arguably here, I'm not directly engaging with the action. Direct engagement with object in action is I'm acting on an object. Here I'm not acting on an object, I'm acting myself, and the object gets moved. So maybe this is a lack of engagement in melachos. Don't forget, melachos aren't just causing an outcome. Outcomes can happen on Shabbos. We don't care about this. You can have a time switch and the like, at least as far as Torah law is concerned. Can things get cooked on Shabbos? No problem. Put them on before Shabbos, they can cook on Shabbos, at least as far as Torah law is concerned. Can lights go on and off on Shabbos? Can flame be lit on Shabbos? No problem. You can have your time switch. The problem is my engagement with the action. That's a problem. And we've seen that even relatively low level of disengagement is enough to make me exempt. For example, shinoi. So even a non-classic form of engagement is already a disengagement. The whole theology behind sort of philosophy behind grammar is that even though I've caused the result, I wasn't engaged enough in it. But I say so. We learn that from a pasuk. You have to do it. Here, in a sense, there's also a type of disengagement. I don't mean literally grammar in the classic sense of the word. There's no advanced causal change. We saw grammar has to be there's a delay and has to be causal delay. Of course, you're in a sense directly doing it. There's no doubt about that. But the point is, I'm not acting on the object. I'm acting on myself, and the object moves along with me. Maybe that's the weakness in the melacha. So again, I'm not here for now taking sides. We will see whether all interpretations are possible in all Rishonim. I will give away the punchline. We're not going to fully resolve this. In some Rishonim, we're going to see they're assuming one model or the other, but not in all the Rishonim. But this is the question that we have over here. This is two ways of reading Rav. Rav approaches Rebbe and says, I think there's a weakness in the case where I'm not moving the object from A to B, but I'm trundling along with the object on my shoulder or wherever it is, in my bag, in my pocket. Model number one is the weakness is that the object, I'm not changing the place of the object, I'm changing the reshus of the object, but I'm not moving it from place to place because its place halachically is deemed on me. Model number two is I am even moving the place of the object, but I'm doing so indirectly because I'm not, in a sense, directly engaging the object. I'm merely engaging with myself. I'm moving, and the object gets dragged along with me. But we'll have to see in a moment what the answer to the Gemara is. But mathematically, these are the only two ways I can understand the Shaila. I'm not coming here from any halacha. I'm just telling you what appears to me the two ways to read the Shaila. Does anyone have any other? This is a genuine question, not a rhetorical question. Does anyone have any other suggestions as to what the Shaila might be, or is this mathematically? To me, these are the two weaknesses. One is objectively, I'm not moving place to place. One is subjectively, I'm not engaging with it. Yeah.
Could there be another model, just that you need a vertical movement to be called Akira, or kind of sideways movement from rest to be called Akira?
I struggle to know what that would mean. Well, why would the direction of travel make a difference?
I don't know. I'm just saying, could it be a model?
I don't know what that would mean. I don't know what that would mean in logically. By the way, if that was the case, I would question why the Gemara would phrase it as Akiras Gufo. The point isn't Akiras Gufo. The point is direction of travel. You could have even in your hands. Let's say you have an object sitting on a table, and I vertically slide the object off the table into the air, move it along, and it slides onto a table of identical height in the other rishus. Then that would be the same Shaila. So you could say, I'm thinking on my feet because I didn't consider this possibility. I want to reflect upon it before I dismiss it out of hand, but I didn't consider this possibility. And thinking on my feet is because I don't see a rationale for such a model, and it doesn't. Thinking also on my feet, it doesn't seem the way the Gemara would have phrased the Shaila. So, but it just adds consideration. Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
So just one other model
Good. Yeah.
we thought of, which is. I think later on the Gemara talks about having something floating on a puddle.
Yes.
At rest.
Yes.
So can we say that the question is something on your body, is that at rest in the first place or not? Because if so, Akiras Gufo, Akiras Hotzaah, is really saying, is your body like a pillar, so that it's at rest? Is your body a bit of a wobbly thing, so it's never at rest on your body at all? Would that be a separate?
Okay. This is a very fine point. And maybe I should stand corrected because in the answer to the Gemara, we're kind of going to explore these things. You don't have to go as far as the puddle scenario. Rashi or the Gemara really already mentions it, and Rashi speaks about it, Yodolo Naich, and things like that. So I'll tell you why I didn't lay it out as the question, because I'm kind of subsuming that I'm not changing the mokum of the object. The mokum of the object is on me, not in the rishus, because of that intuition that you're coming from. But maybe there's more that could have been unpicked in that direction. There are, by the way, other questions we could ask about Akira, and indeed the Gemara will ask those. Another example is, this is taking ADI's point, but going further, why did I never lift it off? And the weakness of my table scenario, where I'm sliding it along, is at least it's removed from the ground. What happens if I roll something along the ground? That's a really interesting question. I have a football in my front garden, and I roll it onto the street. a gated garden, so it's Rosh Hashanah, and I roll it through the end gap onto the street. So at no point does it get lifted up. That's also really, we're going to see a Gemara later that will talk about that. But there, doesn't sound to me that that's what our Gemara is asking over here. It seems our Gemara is asking, the point is Akiras Kefetz Gufo, the point is the weakness of Guf. Yeah. Okay, other models, Adam and Rafi. Sorry.
I was just thinking that
Who should I give the right to ask first, right? We have Toddy V'She'ena Toddy Kleidon, which Adam is no longer you, but is now Rafi. On the other hand, we have Kibbutov, and Rafi's also Mechuyev in your cupboard. So I went for, I was actually thinking about this as I was questioning who do we ask first? But yes, Adam, go for it. No, go for it, Adam. Yeah, no, Chas v'shalom, yeah.
but I was just reflecting on the fact that up until now we've been talking about Akira, Havara, Hanoch.
Yes.
This seems to be the first time where Akira and Havara come at the same time, as opposed to when you move outside, you've got Akira, Havara together, and then you've got Hanoch. So you've actually, I thought that, we've not seen this.
It's a very fine point, and I'm going to come on to this in the answer to the Gemara. The reason I'm not saying it in the question of the Gemara is because, again, it kind of begs the question: if the mokum of the object is the body of the person, then it only moves rishus when it moves rishus, and there's no change of mokum at all. If the place of the object is really in the rishus, then arguably, as I lift my body up and begin moving, there is an akira from the mokum already then taking place. So I will address your point, but in systematic thinking, I focused on that in the answer of the Gemara, and one of the possible answers of the Gemara, not in the question. But it's a fine point. Again, I subsumed it in my two possibilities because they seem to me to encompass even your point. Rafi.
Maybe another weakness in this case is that someone else did the akira to put it on the shoulder, and then we need to we need to consider that original akira to be null, void. It's more to have another akira from the body.
Okay, this is also a very, very fine point. The reason I didn't mention this also is because, again, I think it's subsumed in my previous points. What do we mean when we say someone else did akira? Your point emerges in the language of the Gemara in a very fine way, because the Gemara does say hitino chaveroi. And don't forget, we've just come from the sukkah of Shtaim Shasura. I was actually hoping someone would make your point. We've just come from the sukkah of Shtaim Shasura, where two people do the malacha. And the very next question, our Gemara conveniently has two dots printed in it. But the very next question of the Gemara is, what happens if someone loads you? So it does sound like the Gemara is asking a sort of Shtaim Shasura question. Has the loader done a significant part of the malacha? But again, my question, my bounce back to that is, what has the loader actually done? And therefore, it reconnects to our previous points. If even after them putting it on my shoulder, I am a human table, and the object is just sitting on a table in the rishus, they haven't done anything meaningful. Everyone would agree that if there's an apple on the floor, I pick it up and put it on a table, and then someone else comes over, picks the apple up from the table and carries it out and puts it down in the rishus harabim, they're chayiv. Because my act of putting it on the table is meaningless. So is in being hitino chavero, in loading me, has the other person done anything meaningful? And if they have, and then somehow it's already, an akira has already taken place, translation, the mokum of the object is now on me and not in the rishus, then it's true that this would be built on Shtaim Shasura, because if we could somehow combine action, that would be enough. But then the point is, there's no akira here because I'm not changing the mokum of the object. So again, I'm subsuming it in my two models, because the only way for me to understand that the other one, the loader, has done the akira, is if we view that something has been achieved by the loader, and somehow the object's mokum is now on me or something like that, not in the rishus itself. Yeah. So again, this is a super point, but I still push back and think that conceptually there's only one or two ways to understand the Gemara. Either now that it's on me, it's no longer, its place is no longer the grounds of the rishus, the place of the rishus, and that's the weakness. Or the weakness is, no, nothing has changed. I'm doing everything the same as if I carry it out in my hand, but I'm not acting on the object, subject of object of it. That's the only way I can understand the child of the Gemara. So yes. Okay.
Sorry, one thing. In terms of these two models, given that Rashi actually translates Akiras Gufo and he says does that play into either one of those two models?
I didn't think about this question. The question of those online is Rashi's comment on Akiras Gufo. Maybe wrongly, I just read Rashi practically, he's explaining what Akiras Gufo is. Rashi says, Sha'okas raglov min abayis, la'achas sheniton. But I shouldn't have done that. I should have thought more conceptually. I should have thought more care what Rashi is saying. Rabbi, so let's just all pause together over Eliyahu's point. What does Rashi, Akiras Gufo, or maybe not, I don't know. Is Rashi saying something conceptual or just explaining to us something? Sha'okas raglov min abayis, la'achas sheniton.
I felt a little bit like Adam's point that
Yeah.
he says it doesn't say Sha'akaras Raglov min haritzvah.
Yeah.
It says Sha'akar min habayis, that you're combining the Akira and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. I will come in Rashi's answer to the Shida. I was going to make a similar point to your point and Adam's point. I hadn't thought about it in the question, maybe wrongly, and again I want to reflect on this. I'm also hearing in Rashi flavors of, but again, yeah, okay, we need to think about all of that. Good. So we need to underline at least two words in the Rashi, and perhaps all the words in Rashi. We need to me, I'm hearing Raglov needing to be underlined. The point is that you are, it's something. It's a subjective word, Raglov. Rashi seems to be emphasizing the point is you're moving your legs, not moving the object. That's what I'm hearing in Raglov. And min habayis is a funny way of saying it. You're not okas raglov min habayis. You're okas raglov, as you say, from the place, from the mokum. She'okah is raglov min mekomo, we would say. You moved yourself from the place. Why does Rashi say okas raglov min habayis? Yeah. In fact, last time I learned Shabbos, I remember thinking about this point, and I forgot about it this time. Yeah, I mean, habayis, very significant words. Thank you. So Shabbos Aveda. Yeah. No, very important point. Okay, do we hear where Eliyahu's point? It's an unusual comment of Rashi. She'okas raglov min habayis. That's the Akiras Gufo. Surely the Akiras Gufo is Akira. As soon as you begin walking, you've done the Akira. When does the Akira occur? When you begin walking, we would think. You now moved it from space. The Havara is when you cross the border, but the Akira is when you leave the place. No, says Eliyahu. Rashi says, Anton's point, that even Akira is taking place when you're Akam and Abayis. Okay, important. Good. Are we comfortable with that? Hello? Yeah, good. I need to agree with the chaburah. Yeah. Okay, wonderful. Okay. So, in the answer of the Gemara, and again, I'm not saying all these answers are good or they all fit with all the Rishonim, or I'll now add they all fit, just to defend myself next time, they all fit the Tiyuk of Rosh and Rashi. I have no idea about that. But just mathematically, I hear three possibilities in the answer of the Gemara, and I just want to explore the answer of Rebbe. So Rebbe answers Chayev. You are Chayev. Why? Why are you Chayev? And here we do get back to some of the points that are being made. So you could answer that Rebbe's answer is, there's no shaila here. You've done a full akira and full hanacha. You are being oka the object mimakomi. In my question, I asked, maybe you're being oka the object. You're not doing an akira because the object was already sitting bimkomi. The mokum of the object is on my body, and therefore I'm not changing the mokum of the object. The place of the object. The answer is I'm changing the place of the object. The place of the object is the place where I'm standing, and as I begin walking, I'm being oka the object from komo. So there's no shaila to be asked. I mean, there's a shaila to be asked because you could have been confused about this. But my answer says, Rabbi, is you are oka the object from komo. You oka the chayfetz from komo. That's called the change of the place of the oka, and therefore you have everything you would want. In other words, we're remaining with our assumption to do melachot Shabbos. You need to do an akira mim komo. You need to do a havara of a reshus, and you do the hanocha mim komo, and you do that. Because when the object is sitting on you, the mokum is the place where you're standing. When you move, you're moving the mokum of the object. Therefore, you have an akira. You then cross the boards and you've got havara, and then you stand still. Let's say again, we're not talking about the hanacha element of it, but let's just say for simplicity, you then stand still and you're doing the hanacha, and that is enough. That's enough. There's nothing missing in that. This is model number one. Model number two is you don't need. By the way, in this model, in what I'm calling model number one, and just an analogy of this would be if you have two objects, one sitting on top of the other one, and you carry both objects out. Am I only chayav for the lower object? Because the mokum of the upper object is the lower object? No. They were just two objects held on top of each other, and I moved both out. Right? And you can imagine scenarios where there'd be enough gemina between the two. Let's say the lower object was below the shear, and the upper, right? There's a shear for melachot Shabbos. Let's say the Shiur of Masechet Shabbat is a grogress, a date, let's say, and I balance an orange on top of a date, half a date, I don't know, and I carry out the smaller object. So I'm not chayav with the smaller object. Am I potter for the larger object because it's sitting on top of the smaller object? Or let's say I'm shogeg with respect to the lower object and mazed with respect to the upper object. I think the halacha is that you're allowed to carry books on Shabbos because they're very holy, but you can't carry apples on Shabbos. And I carry an apple on top of a book, right? So would I be potter for the apple because underneath I'm carrying the book? Both objects were sitting in the rishus, and I've done everything. Would there be harm? So all an object sitting in my body is like one object on top of another object. That's one way to view the answer of the Gemara. The second way to view the answer of the Gemara, and this zooms into Adam and Hill's point, is that no, for Akira I don't need that I'm changing the mokum of the object. All I need is I'm changing the reshus of the object, and that's enough to be chayiv. Normally speaking, I first do Akira, then I do Havara, and then I do Halacha. In this case, I'm doing the Akira by changing the reshus. The mokum of the object was indeed on me, but I'm doing Akira by doing Havara. That's enough. I've transferred the object from reshus to reshus. Now, we will have to unpick that answer and see whether it makes sense or not and whether it's right or not, but at least conceptually, this is a reasonable, possible explanation of Rav's answer. Are you with me in this? Yeah. A third possibility, I'm just changing my notes actually because I think this is the correct order zoning. Third possibility is that really the mokum of the object is on the body of the person and not on the ground. And you do need an Akiras chayvetz. However, the Akiras guf is also sufficient for an Akira of the chayvetz. In other words, you do need to move an object from its makom harishon, from its first base, but you don't need that the Akira is done in the chayvetz. It's sufficient that you've done the Akira in the guf, in the body. Let me just try and explain this possibility because it's quite subtle. Why do we need an Akira of an object? Surely you should be chayav for Havara. You move the object from a shus to a shus. One possible answer to the question is very much around the subjective element of the object of the melacha, my engagement with the melacha. I need to bow myself to the melacha. I need to immerse myself in the melacha. I need to engage with the melacha in the fullest sense, and that is I take the object on myself and I move it from a shus to a shus. Maybe in this answer, even though the object was placed on me, the akira of the guf, me moving myself, is a sufficient engagement with the melacha to make you chayiv for the melacha. So again, this sounds counterintuitive to. We come into the Masechta assuming that when we read the first Mishnah, we see that there's an akira and hanacha, that you need the akira and hanacha because of something you're doing to the object. Maybe the thing you're doing to the object that matters is the havara. Akira is necessary as a prerequisite to the hanacha, sort of a start of the melacha and engagement with it. And hanacha, we already kind of alluded to this a bit when we looked at Shnam Shasua, is like a completion of the action. Maybe there's another way to start and complete an action, which is through Akiras Gufo and Akiras and Hanachas Gufo. Maybe you don't need that you're doing the Akira in the object. The object has to move from Rishus to Rishus, but maybe it's a good start to the melacha to move myself and a good end to the melacha to place myself in position. Again, mathematically, these were the three models I could come up with in understanding the response of Rav. I just want to pause for a moment to see if everyone is happy with those three models, and then if we have time, see if there's any other models of understanding. Leon, is this okay? Yeah, you okay with this? That's a sighing okay, or a happy okay? Yeah? Okay, wonderful. There's lots of contemplating this. Okay, these are the three models. Does everyone? I think the first model is a simple model to understand. The first model is the mokum of the chayfetz is on the ground, and the whole thing's based on a misunderstanding, exactly as if I'd carry two objects piled out on top of each other. Why did Rav not think about it in the question? The answer is because a human's not an object; he's a subject. If I have two objects, one piled on top of the other, I'm acting on both when I carry one out. If I'm carrying something out, I'm doing an action. I'm not carrying myself out. I'm not an object. There isn't a me and an object. And here there's me carrying two objects. I'm carrying my body and I'm carrying the object. It's me carrying the object. But the counter argument is, yeah, okay, but from a practical, from a halachic point of view, or reasonableness point of view, a common sense point of view, either, the place of the object is on the rishus, and I'm changing the mokum of the object. Model number two also is in a sense easy to understand, though we will see it's very problematic. problematic. Model number 2 is, it's true I'm not changing the mokum of the object, but in moving the object from one rishus to another, that's enough. Model number 3 is quite subtle. Model number 3 is saying that the reason I need an akira of an object was never to do with the result of the melacha, in a sense. The result of the melacha is the object moved from one rishus to another. It was more to do with start of the melacha and completion of the melacha, engagement with melacha. And the chaburah shavav is that me moving my body is enough of a start of the melacha and an engagement with the melacha, and therefore enough of a conclusion of the melacha. Even though from the object's point of view, it was already midair, and already had a new mokum, or didn't have a new mokum, who cares? The point is, Akiras Gufo, it rings in the language of the Gemara quite nicely. Akiras Gufo, Akiras Chayfetz, that's enough of what I'm doing. That's a third model of understanding the answer of Rav.
That allow that it's not, in certain circumstances, you could be more makel.
We're going to, when we unpick these models, think of all sorts of thought experiments that will give me different outcomes in these models. I'll give you just one example of a thought experiment. What happens? You can throw an object from rishus to rishus. I know we haven't yet learned Hotzaah because the whole period. But I pick up an object. I've picked it up. I've done akira. I throw the object. I've done chaburah, and then the object lands. I've done a halacha. Very interesting. And it ties a bit up into our previous Gemaras about hates. Thing. What happens if I throw an object in the air, run very quickly to the other side and catch the object? So it's landed on the same body. Is that also another example of Akiras Chayfetz character or not? I'm just saying this as a thought. Each of these models may have differences in how it plays out. I'm not trying to confuse anyone here, so we'll build up slowly. But each model has different different conceptual framework within which it's operating. And we've run out of time, so we'll stop here. I hope that's launched us into the sugya, and in Hashem Tuesday we'll continue to investigate this matter. What I would urge everyone is really to read I made this mistake myself, and thank you for correcting me. Read every word of Rashi with care, every word of Tosfos with care. The bottom Tosfos, for now, leave the earlier Tosfos, just the bottom Tosfos, where Tosfos quotes Rashi and seems to quote Rashi quite differently to the way we have Tosfos. And if you have time, again, leave the Maram. I regret mentioning it on the sources because it's not necessary. We kind of just circumvented the Maram. I should have said the point, my first reading of the question I got from the Maram, but it doesn't matter where I got it from. There's two ways of reading the question, and but read with care the Rosh also, and then we'll try and carry on. So that's our task, our mission in understanding the sugya. I wish everyone a good day.